Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. How do India's leading authors respond to the treatment given to Taslima Nasreen over the last 14 days? That's the key issue I shall explore today with Booker Prize-winning novelist Arundhati Roy. Arundhati Roy, let me start with that question. How do you respond to the way Taslima Nasreen has been treated for almost 14 days?
Well, it's actually almost 14 years, but right now it's 14 days. And I respond with dismay but not surprise, because I see it as part of a larger script, and everybody's, saying their lines, exchanging parts, saying their lines.
She, I believe, has been in touch with you. What has she told you about the experience she's been through?
Well, I have to say, I was devastated listening to what she said, because here's this woman, an exile, all alone. Since August, she's been under pressure, she says, from the West Bengal police, who visit her every day, saying, get out of here, go to Kerala, go to Europe, go to Rajasthan, do anything but get out of here. People are trying to kill you. Not offering to protect her, but saying, get out. And then in November, on the 15th of November, when there was the huge march in Calcutta against Nandigram, they basically told her, now you're going to be killed, so we're going to move you from your flat to some other place. And they did it, but they withdrew most of her security, which is paradoxical, because on the day when supposedly she was under the most threat, she had no protection, and a few days later they basically gave her a ticket and pushed her out of the state.
Listening to the story she told you about herself, do you believe that the West Bengal government's behavior has been unacceptable?
Well, it's been utterly, ridiculously unacceptable. What can I say? But here you have a situation where you're really threatening and coercing a person.
Far from protecting her, they were threatening her.
Absolutely.
What about Buddhadev Bhattacharjee himself? He's a poet, he's an author. How does he emerge from this story?
He emerges from the story, as far as I'm concerned, as the principal scriptwriter, who managed quite cleverly to shift all the attention from Nandigram to Taslima. And Taslima is not the person who's, displacing the poor peasants of Nandigram. She's not the person who's robbing people of their daily
So he used her as a pawn to take the pressure off himself in terms of Nandigram.
I think very successfully, because we are discussing her and not Nandigram right now.
So he's failed to stand by any of the constitutional duties that as a chief minister he should have upheld.
Well, we should, I should say at this point that we do not have the constitutional right to free speech. We have many, many caveats, between us and free speech. So maybe he's upheld the constitutional rights to us not having free speech.
Now, on Friday, Taslima Nasreen announced that 3 pages from her autobiography, Dukhindito, which allegedly had given offense to her critics, are to be withdrawn. Do you see that as a sensible compromise or a mistake?
Well, neither. She doesn't have any choices. She's just like a person who's now got the protection of the mafia, which is the Indian state in some way. So she doesn't have any choices. She has nowhere to go. She has no protection. She just has to she has to blunder her way through this kind of humiliation now. And I really feel for her.
You used an interesting phrase. You said she has to blunder her way through this humiliation. Was withdrawing those 3 pages, admittedly under pressure, a blunder?
Well, I don't know. Honestly, we can all be very brave in the security of our lives, but she has nobody to turn to, nowhere to go. I don't know what I would have done in that situation.
She had no other choice, perhaps.
She really is in a mess. And I think it's a reflection on all of us.
Let's come to the issues, the principles that in a sense underlie what I call the Taslima Nasreen story. To begin with, do you view freedom of speech as an absolute freedom without any limitations, or would you accept that there are certain specific constraints that we all have to accept?
Look, it's a complicated question and has been debated often. I personally do view it as something that should have no caveats, because for the simple reason that in a place where there are so many contending beliefs, so many conflicting things, only the powerful will then decide what those caveats should be are. And the caveats will always be used by the powerful.
So you're saying that, in fact, given the fact that many people in India are vulnerable, freedom of speech for them should have no caveats, it should be absolute, that's their only protection?
I think so. I think so. Because,
Okay,
because if you look at it, look at the fact that you have outfits like the VHP or the Bajrang Dal or that CD that the BJP produced in the UP elections. They do what they want to do. The powerful always do what they want to do. It is the powerless and the vulnerable that need free speech.
Let's explore the position that you're taking, that freedom of speech is an absolute freedom, there should be no limitations on it. What about the view that by criticizing Islam, Taslima has offended beliefs which for tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of Indians are sacred? These are beliefs that underlie their dignity, their sense of identity. Should freedom of speech extend that far as to threaten people's sense of themselves?
Look, I don't believe that a writer like Taslima Nasreen can undermine the dignity of 10 million people. You know, who is she? She's not a scholar of Islam. She doesn't even claim that Islam is her subject. She might have said extremely stupid things about Islam. I have no problem. I mean, the quotations I've heard, the Condito has not been translated in English. But let's assume that what she said was stupid and insulting to Islam. But, you know, you have to be prepared to be insulted by something that insignificant.
Well, let me quote to you some of the things that she said, not from the Quindito, but from an interview she gave to Anthony McIntyre in The Blanket in 2006. She says, "It's not true that Islam is good for humanity. It's not at all good. Islam completely denies human rights." Elsewhere, she talks about what she calls the venomous snake of Islam. To me, that sounds as if it goes perhaps beyond simple critique into deliberate provocation.
It sounds like Donald Rumsfeld or, you know, some Christian fundamentalist saying stuff about Islam.
And you would rile at Donald Rumsfeld, so why shouldn't others rile at her?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say ban him or kill him, you know. I would say, what a ridiculous person, you know. What a ridiculous thing. How can you start reacting to every... You know, we have an infinite number of stupidities in the world. How can you start having your foundations rocked by every half-wit?
Let me put it like this. Does freedom of speech necessarily include the right to offend?
Obviously, it includes the right to offend, otherwise it wouldn't be the freedom of speech.
But is that an acceptable right in India?
One person's offense is another person's freedom, you know.
That may be so in England, it may be so in America, where Western levels of education have allowed people to hear something offensive without reacting violently. But in India, where the education levels are so disparate, where religion is so emotional and so passionately held, then if you have freedom of speech verging into the right to offend, you end up provoking people often to violence, sometimes to death.
Look, first of all, I think we have to understand that education is a very loaded term, you know, because modernity is what is creating some of this kind of radical fundamentalism, you know. And it's not like traditional India. In fact, if you look at any studies that have been done, actually communal riots have increased.
Aren't you evading my point? You're questioning what is meant by modernity, what is meant by education, but you know and I know that the levels of sophistication in terms of being able to handle offense to your religion or criticism of your God vary hugely in India.
No, but what I'm saying is the level of sophistication is far better in rural areas than, let's say, in urban areas.
I mean, rural Indians are better able to take a criticism of Ram or Allah.
If you look at the kinds of riots in urban and rural areas, you'll see that, you know, historically.
Let me give you a specific example and then answer that.
Okay.
If criticism of Islam by Taslima Nasreen leads to a situation where people come out and riot on the streets and there's a real genuine threat that innocent people could end up killed, what in that circumstance should be the government's priority? To defend freedom of speech or to take steps to prevent the loss of human life?
Well, I don't think that's a choice. You know, I think they have to defend freedom of speech and do everything that they can to prevent the loss of human life. Because here, what is happening is that this kind of right to offend or my sentiments have been hurt has become a business in democratic politics. So it's that the governments, let's say the political parties, are engineering these situations and creating situations in which which lead to a loss of life. Otherwise, why should it be that Dwikondito has been on the bestseller list for 4 years in West Bengal and nothing has happened? And suddenly when there's a march, a massive march and a massive mobilization against the CPM, it suddenly reappears as insulting people's sentiments.
So you're saying that mischief makers, manipulators whipped up sentiments 4 or 5 years after the book was published to deliberately try and corner Taslima and to create an atmosphere that perhaps worked in some peculiar way to the advantage of the West Bengal government.
She's I mean, it's you know, look at who's benefiting from it. You know, all the anger about Nandigram has now suddenly turned to us asking the same state that criminally killed people in Nandigram to now protect Taslima Nasreen, and it comes out as the state that is going to defend. Are you going so far
as to suggest that perhaps the West Bengal government in some way was involved in engineering this incident to deflect attention from Nandigar to Taslima?
I would say that it would have had a lot to do with it. And I'm saying that it's so easy to do these things now.
Let me come back to what, when the situation happened, would have been judged as perhaps Buddhadev Bhattacharya's dilemma. Perhaps as a poet and author, he felt a need or a desire to defend freedom of speech. As a chief minister, undoubtedly he knew that he had a duty to stop and prevent the loss of human life. If therefore, by putting pressure on Taslima Nasreen to leave the state for a while, he was able to save 10, 15 or 20 lives that would have otherwise been lost on the streets of Calcutta, did he not do the right thing?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that, you know, I think that's the game that they would like us to play, you know. I did it in order to defend innocent lives. But I think there's a much deeper script in the understanding of what is known as the deep state. You know, I think that this was a provocation that actually could have ended up creating the loss of lives, you know, because I want to go back to it. Why should it be that for 4 years that book was on the market and no lives were lost?
So you really do believe...
Everything is in the timing.
So you really do believe, when you use phrases like the deep state, that there was a conspiracy, even if we don't understand it fully, A, to deflect attention from Nandigram to Taslima, and B, to perhaps put her in a position where under pressure she was forced to leave and the government didn't actually have to physically throw her out?
I don't think, I mean, I wouldn't use the word conspiracy because that, you know, that sounds like an intelligence operation. And I don't think something like this needs to go so far as a conspiracy. But certainly...
A plan?
I would certainly say that you need to examine the timing of this, because that's all we are ever left with in India. No one ever gets to the bottom of anything. It's always like, who benefits? Why did this happen now? I would like to know why did it happen now. So
you're saying something that's pretty fundamental. You're saying, far from simply, as you did at the beginning, saying that the West Bengal government behaved unacceptably, now you're saying that there was almost Machiavellian intent. Maybe not a conspiracy, but Machiavellian intent behind the way they've played this game out.
I would say that this is, you know, I mean, you're making it sound as if I have a very deep insight, but I think that's what...
No, you have a deep distrust and a huge suspicion.
Yes, that's true, but I also know that this is the word on the street. I mean, it's not, you don't need a rocket scientist to figure this out. It's something we've seen again and again and again and again. You know, it's nothing new or amazing that's happening.
Let's take a break at that point, Arundhati Roy. I want to come back, and in part 2 I want to talk to you about the response of Pranab Mukherjee on behalf of the central government in Parliament. How do you react to what he said? Is that an acceptable position for the democracy of India to have taken? Or once again, are you worried by what you suspect? We'll be back in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with Booker Prize winning novelist Arundhati Roy. Arundhati Roy, let's turn to the central government's response to Taslima Nasreen. Speaking in Parliament on Wednesday, Pranab Mukherjee said that India would continue to extend protection and sanctuary to Taslima Nasreen. And then he added, it is also expected that guests will refrain from activities and expressions that may hurt the sentiments of our people. How do you respond to that rider?
Well, it's like being sentenced to good behavior for the rest of your life, which is a death sentence for a writer. You know, if I had to live somewhere in those conditions, I would, become a yoga instructor or something. I'd give up writing because this is such a nasty thing to do. Here is a woman who is a writer, who is a Bengali writer. She can't function outside, and I think it's a question of principle anyway. It's not about her, it's about us. What kind of society are we creating? Sure, it's tough to take on the kinds of things that she said about Islam, but she should be put in her place intellectually and otherwise, not like this where she will become a martyr to somebody else.
What about something else? When Pranab Mukherjee says that it is expected that guests will refrain from activities and expressions that may hurt the sentiments of our people, is he, in a very real sense, giving Muslim fundamentalists a veto both over what Taslima can write and say, and therefore over whether she can stay in Calcutta?
But who does he mean when he says our people? Am I included, for example? Because by doing this, he certainly hurt my sentiments. So you can't really match people's sentiments.
Quite right. You're absolutely right in saying our people includes a whole range of people.
Yes.
But I suspect that when he says our people, he had those who were protesting against Taslima on the streets of Calcutta in mind. Has he therefore given them a veto over what she can write and say, and therefore a veto over whether she can continue to live in Calcutta?
Not her. He has taken a veto over all of us. I've also been told by the Supreme Court that you'll behave yourself and you'll write how we ask you to write. I will not, and I hope that is extended to everybody here.
In which case, let me put it like this, and we're coming sadly to the end of this interview. Given that Taslima's case is not a unique case, you've suffered, as you said, at the hands of the Supreme Court, M.F. Hussain has suffered, art students in Baroda have suffered, even people doing cartoons and satires of Gandhi on YouTube have suffered. Are we an intolerant people?
No, we're just a messy people, and what I'm saying is either you have the principle of free speech or you have caveats that will fill up this whole room, and we'll all just be silenced, and there will be no art, and there will be no music, and there will be no cinema.
Are we moving in that direction where the caveats to free speech are becoming so many that there is no freedom to be artistic?
The thing is, it doesn't matter. You see, what I'm saying doesn't matter. I might believe in this, but I know that tomorrow I have to deal with the thugs of the government, of the courts, of the fundamentalists, of everybody. In order to live here, you are like living in gang war. So what I believe in or don't believe in is only theoretical. How I practice is a separate matter, and to survive here, we survive amongst thugs.
But then the corollary to what you're saying is very important. You're saying that artists, particularly those who see things differently, particularly those who are stretching out and wanting to be new and avant-garde, have to contend with the thugs, as you call them, with the government and with the majority that's trying to push them back.
We do, and we will. The thing is that I also don't expect to be mollycoddled. I know that we have a fight on our hands, and how do we survive in this gang war? The state is just another gang, as far as I'm concerned.
So what you're saying is it's not easy to be different in India.
Well, it's challenging. Let's say it's challenging, and we accept that challenge.
What's your advice, very quickly, to Taslima Nasreen?
I really don't have any advice. I feel very, 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 very bad for her, because if I may say this, hers is actually the tragedy of displacement. Once she has been displaced from her home, she has no rights. She's a guest, and she's been treated very badly. She's been humiliated.
Arundhati Roy, a pleasure.